New research reveals the puzzling finding that Mexico has offered greater legal equality for LGBT people for a longer period of time than the United States. This can be explained by the wider separation of church and state in Mexican politics and the strong importance of human rights in new democracies. At the subnational level, states with more LGBT organizations and governors from left parties are more likely to recognize same sex relationships, but the religious makeup of states only matters in the United States, not in Mexico. Common stereotypes about Mexico's macho culture might lead us to expect that the legal landscape for gay rights in Mexico would be far less egalitarian than in the United States. Major theories of comparative politics about the influence of social movements in religion and the left would also predict more equal legal treatment of sexual minorities in the United States than in Mexico. Yet, a review of important gay rights legislation in the two countries shows the opposite. We find that this puzzling outcome exists when comparing national level laws, but not only in many important gay rights policies and left movements, but not religion. Comparative research has found that countries with more powerful social movements, less religious populations, and strong left parties are more likely to extend equal rights to sexual minorities. The US has a much more powerful LGBT right movements, a less religious population, and was governed by a center left party for a greater portion of the past 2 decades than Mexico. We would therefore expect the US to have a much more egalitarian legal framework for sexual minorities than Mexico, but in fact, that is not the case. Mexico abolished most discriminatory legal distinctions based on sexual orientation long before the United States. Mexico decriminalized sodomy in 1871, more than 100 years before the US Supreme Court overturned anti sodomy laws in 2003. The one legal discriminatory point in Mexican law was a double penalty for corruption of a minor if it involved homosexuality. This provision was changed in 1991. The United States has no national anti-discrimination laws to protect LGBT people. In 2003, the Mexican Chamber of Deputies unanimously passed a national anti-discrimination law that included sexual orientation as a protected category, established a new agency to enforce the anti-discrimination law, and developed a national anti-homophobia campaign. Moreover, the first article of the Mexican Constitution prohibits discrimination based on sexual preferences. There is no explicit constitutional protection for sexual orientation in the United States. We would emphasize, however, that in many ways the rule of the law has not been effectively implemented in Mexico, and agents of the state use violence in ways that are not authorized by the law. Individual state actors have used state violence against sexual minorities, often with impunity. While the law is not always effectively enforced in Mexico, the law does not allow for legal discrimination of sexual minorities. While a simple understanding of the major theories of comparative politics does not adequately explain these differences, we find that a more nuanced understanding of religion and party ideology helps to explain national level divergences. An overwhelming majority of Mexicans belong to a religion that condemns homosexuality, and Mexicans are more religious than people in the United States. However, the separation between church and state has been much wider in Mexico than in the United States. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, a text which contains dogmas and teachings of the Church, names homosexual acts as intrinsically immoral and contrary to the natural law, and names homosexual tendencies as objectively disordered. While the Catholic Church does not consider homosexual orientation sinful in and of itself, it does have a very negative attitude towards it. In 1986, the letter states, although the particular inclination of the homosexual person is not a sin, it is a more or less strong tendency ordered toward an intrinsic moral evil, and thus the inclination itself must be seen as an objective disorder. In Mexico, there is a powerful discourse about the secular nature of the state, and it is politically unacceptable to promote a religious rationale for policy decisions. Even religious conservatives couch their political discourse in secular terms. This contrasts sharply with the pervasive appeals to religious doctrine found in the US politics. Thus, while religious denomination and level of religiosity do not explain LGBT policy, the relationship between religion and the state seems to be important. We would expect reforms to grant greater rights to homosexual minorities to be more likely when secular, leftist parties are in power. But in Mexico, the new national anti discrimination policies and constitutional reforms took place when the Partido Acción Nacional, a rightist Catholic party, was in power. Moreover, no similar national initiatives were played in the United States even when the Democratic Party controlled the presidency from 1992 to 2000 and 2008 to 2016. Since many important gay rights laws are under the jurisdiction of state governments in Mexico and the United States, we try to focus on subnational policy makings for same-sex relationship recognition. We find that LGBT organizations and leftist parties are important in both the US and Mexico, but religious denomination is only important in the US. States with more LGBT organizations and with leftist governors are more likely to propose and pass laws to recognize same-sex relationships. In the US, states with a higher percentage of evangelical Protestants were less likely to provide legal recognition of same-sex relationships. By contrast, neither the percentage of the population that is evangelical Protestant nor Catholic matters in Mexico.